planting the wrong blends or crops can really set back your entire deer season. To help us not make those mistakes, today I'm gonna bring my friend Keith Berns from Green Cover on. You know, Green Cover sells millions and millions of acres of cover crop seed annually. I believe they sell more acres of cover crop seed every year than all the acres of food plots combined. Doing that and working with all those farmers, they've gained a huge amount of information, and today we want to share that with you. Keith, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Grant. Great to be here.
Yeah, and everyone knows Keith with Green Cover. Keith's been on the show several times, and it's just been a real treasure trove of information about soil health and why diversity in blends helps for me through the years. And I want to take some time and share that with you all before we get into food plot season. So, Keith, I want to kind of jump into deer nutrition, and you and I have talked about this a lot through the years, overlap some with cattle, but they're certainly different, smaller animals, smaller stomach or rumen. So, in the spring, we need protein for antler growth and milk production and developing those fawns. And the fall, switch to energy. I think a lot of people can relate to that now because it's cold outside throughout a lot of the whitetails range.
Yeah, it sure is. And I kind of think of it this way, Grant. Three things, protein, energy, and minerals. And we're never going to be smart enough to have the perfect balance or the perfect ratio out there. So what we need to do, and I think this is true for deer as well as cattle or sheep or whatever livestock, we need to provide enough of a diversity to let the animals choose what they need, because they're really smart. And I know I've heard you talk about deer and how they're very, very intuitive on what they need. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't load things up to have more protein in this season and more energy in this season. And by and large, the minerals are cycling up out of the soil. So what we really need there is really diverse biology working with our plants to bring those minerals up into those plants. And then again, the deer will select what they need. So maybe that's just kind of a lazy cop-out on my part. The animals are smarter than we are with what they need. Provide a good enough buffet for them to choose from, but then be very observant. Be watching what they're eating. Be watching what they're consuming. That will tell you so much if you're just a student of your animals, the student of the deer. And then if you need to tweak something or change something down the road, you sure can. But you'll never know that if you're not watching closely.
It's probably the best answer I've heard throughout my entire career, Keith, and you did it very short order. I appreciate that. One thing I'll add is that varies a little bit by season, right? So a deer's needs in May are a little bit different in June, pre-fawn birth, post-fawn birth, just like our wives change during those childbearing years. Again, a blend not only gives you that diversity at any moment, but through time. Plants come on early, mid, and late season. So yeah, blends once again just really register well. A lot of people talk about perennials, but we can get more diversity with the warm and cool season blend. Speak to that a little bit, Keith.
Well, we sure can, Grant. And, there's C3 and there's C4 plants, and it has to do with how they photosynthesize, how they process sunlight. So there's kind of fancy names, but just think of it this way. The cool season plants, or the C3s, they're not as efficient with processing sunlight, photosynthesis. And that's okay, because there's not as much sunlight in those, colder spring and fall. The summer plants are the ones that have the C4, which again is a fancy name, but just think of it as they're much more efficient at capturing sunlight and turning it into energy. And that's great because they're growing in the longer days. And that's really when we need to capture that sunlight. So what we really look for is a mixture of both of them, because those warm season plants, even though they capture a lot of sunlight, they'll do very little when it's cold. And the cool season things, they're just not going to be as efficient when it's long sunny days. So to really maximize capturing, the great gift that sunlight is from God, we need both. And again, it depends on, when you're planting it. Sometimes, I'm not saying it's the equal amount of both. We're always going to have more cool season things in those fall blends. We're always going to have more warm season things in the summer mixes, but it's never just all of one and not the other. So we try to make intelligent choices when it comes to that. But really, we're trying to capture the maximum amount of sunlight, because That's really what it's all about, Grant. Whether I'm growing corn, cattle, or deer, it all comes from the sun, and we got to capture that carbon dioxide and turn it into glucose, and then that goes into all manner of great things inside that plant that are going to grow our deer.
It's actually a pretty simple system, really complicated to try to get into science, but from an applicator's point of view, it's pretty simple. And one of the biggest mistakes I see, Keith, is people not taking advantage of the sun, and that means bare ground. So
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest evil of a food plotter can do is have bare ground. And we get that with blends going out there and maybe the release process where we're planting right into the other crop. And we've got plants photosynthesizing every day. And we don't want to miss, right, summer solstice. The most sunshine of any day where we can grow the most is probably that day. Is that true, Keith?
Yeah, it sure is. It's the most amount of sunlight. And think of it this way. I love that the name of your program, your company is Growing Deer. It's not killing deer because we could kill deer well with just that food plot, just scatter some brassicas out there. Yeah, that'll bring them in. And there's certainly a place for that. But if you want to grow deer well, you have to think beyond just how do I get them in front of my deer stand? And that's going to involve all these things that we've talked about. And it's going to involve having something growing as often as possible. And especially in those long months, May, June, July, and August are just, there's a lot of sunlight and we have to be able to capture that. I did a little study just and it's probably even more in Missouri because you get more sunlight. But here in Nebraska, just the sunlight that hits the ground, if we could capture every photon and I could sell it for 10 cents a kilowatt hour for, what we pay for electricity, it would be $800,000 a year per acre. That's how much sunlight God gives us. And even a great growth of plants is only going to probably capture 15 to 20% of that. But when we don't have anything growing out there, we may capture 2% of it. And that's just really a waste of what God is giving us. And it's free. It's free. So why not capture it?
Hurts me when I tour properties all the time. They have a good fall plot to attract deer, going back to growing deer, but they don't do a summer plot. And that's when our days are longest, and it grows up with weeds or plants that shouldn't be growing there and that deer don't eat. I'm not seeing deer eat dog fennel or stuff like that. So we want to make sure during that critical month when deer are growing antlers, producing milk for fawns, and better quality venison for us to consume when we harvest them in the fall. Well, those summer months are critical for that. So, yeah. But when we do that, talking about that, you want to keep in mind your goals. And most hunters have a goal to attract deer. You just, address that a little bit. But is our goal a healthy deer population, or is it bigger antlers or more deer? And that goes into what we plant also and how we do that. Talk to that a little bit of just your goals of, again, blends help us get to the goal versus a single species.
This is how I look at it. Big deer with big antlers shouldn't be your goal. That should be the result of your goal. The goal should be to have your soil absolutely as healthy as possible because I promise almost everybody listening to this, you have a treasure trove of minerals in your soil. And if you can get those minerals out of the soil and into the deer, you will grow big antlers. You'll have those trophies, that everybody is looking for. But that shouldn't be your goal. That should be the outcome of the goal. So the goal should be to have your soil as healthy as possible. Number one, we have to protect it from washing away in a big rain because it doesn't matter what you do to your soil. If it washes away, and you know this very well in the Ozark Mountains, you got to start all over. And that is such a long process. And so we need to protect the soil. But then the diversity of plants in combination with the diversity of biology, that's what's releasing the minerals from the soil because the plants can't get to the minerals directly. The biology can. And so it's not just the plants that you're growing, it's the biology in combination with them. And you have some natural biology in the soil. We're putting a wide range of biology right on the seed. So that's giving it that jump start. And then the combination of those two is not only going to have that wide variety, that big plant buffet, so the deer can pick what they want nutritionally, but it's also really rich in those minerals that are needed to grow the big antlers.
Absolutely. And of course, biology, folks, is healthy microbes or healthy bacteria that literally go out in the soil and find what the plant needs and take it to the plant in a very simplified term. But, when we get this right, we could, of course, attract deer, improve and actually build soil. You've seen that here at our place, Keith. I mean,
Yeah.
we can stack it up a little bit and you can hold more moisture because drought, it seems like we're in a wicked drought where we are. Had a little snow, not much moisture, but creeks are low, ponds are low, rivers are really low. Uh, and to get through those dry periods, we need healthy soil because unhealthy soil, you're just going to see cracks and nothing growing, and we're not irrigating food plots. Healthier plants, of course, then suppress weeds. If that food plot gets out of the ground and it's just jumping and it's growing good, weeds don't have much of a chance of competing. You get one every now and then. That doesn't matter in a food plot situation. We're not using a combine and taking those seeds to sell it somewhere. We're letting deer be our harvester there. So with improved soil, everything comes full around. And at the end of the day, big antlers are just part of that.
It's no different, Grant, than, we work with farmers all the time. And if somebody's goal is to grow 250 bushel corn, well, you can do that by spending a ton of money and dumping all this stuff on to grow it. But if your goal is to have the healthiest possible soil, the healthiest possible combination of plants and biology, then a really good profitable crop is the outcome of the goal and not the goal itself. And so it's kind of similar, but it changes the mindset of how you approach the problem.
Absolutely. And I should add here, when we talk a lot about minerals, which are important, but people want to go, dump a bucket of, XYZ brand of minerals out there. That's not the same for a lot of reasons. When a mineral goes into a plant and the plant does its magic, it's available to the deer. And it's not all these commercial adhesives and stuff making a block stick together or colored a certain way, all these additives that God never meant to be ingested by deer or a human, folks.
Yeah.
So we all know, we've heard this forever. If we're eating a healthy diet, we don't need a vitamin, right? Same's true for deer. If they have really healthy habitat, and this research is clear, deer on healthy habitat do way better than any supplements we can give them for a lot of reasons. Keith, I just got back from working down by Tallahassee, Florida, southeastern Alabama, southwestern Georgia. It was cold down there, man. But I heard a few guys say, boy, that green cover stuff, it looks good, man. That's good. But that's that Midwestern seed. We're down here in the South, Grant. I'm not even going to go there, Keith, because I'll go on a big rabbit hole, but I'm going to let you explain Midwestern quote unquote seed versus Southern seed.
Yeah. Well, we get this question a lot, not just from food plotters, but from farmers who are using it, many of the same species as cover crops. And here's how I answer that. Here's how I think about it anyway. To me, it makes sense. I think that having seed that's grown very locally to work, the mindset of having I have to plant seed grown locally in order for it to work. That is true in a couple of scenarios. Number one is if you're trying to harvest it for grain, you want something very well adapted to your area. And the other would be is if you're looking for native type perennials. But if you're not trying to grow it out for grain, which for cover crops we're not, for food plots we're not, and we're not doing native perennials, clovers and alfalfas aren't really natives, then I think that really changes how we think about it. So think about it this way. Think about a plant and divide it in half. A plant really has two parts of its life cycle. One is from growing all the way up until it starts to flower. And then the second part is when it's flowering and goes all the way to making seed. Well, that first part, we see that working just about anywhere and everywhere, because really what you need there is you need 2 to 3 months of just good growing season. And you can get that anywhere in the United States if you hit it at the right time. Now, the second part, to get good seed production, well, now that comes into day length and heat and moisture. There's lots of things that have to work right in order to get a good grain crop, and that is not going to work everywhere. But the vegetative biomass certainly will. And when it comes to perennials, think about it this way. And because everybody's already doing this, 90% of all of the turf grass, whether it's your front yard, your golf course, your football fields, 90% of that grass is all grown in Oregon. It's all grown there, but it's planted all across the country and it works fine. But guess what? Nobody's trying to harvest seed off of it. You're keeping it vegetative because you're keeping it mowed, and it grows great vegetatively, and we don't care about the seed part. And that's how we look at food plots. That's how we look at cover crops is we can capture the vegetative growth. And that's really the best part for the soil anyway, because when a plant's growing vegetatively, it's moving all the energy into the soil. It's feeding the biology, it's growing the roots, it's doing all that. And then when it shifts over to produce seed, it starts pulling stuff up out of the soil. And from a soil health standpoint, we'd rather see it going in. And so from a food plot standpoint, it really works well because we can put these annual species in at the right time of the year. And what they plant in Wisconsin can be the same thing they plant in Florida at different times of the year. You've got to hit the growth window right. And then we see that work really, really well. So again, the two situations where you really want to look for localized seed, regionally adapted, if you're trying to grow it out for grain, or you're looking at native type perennials that need to really have a very good fit with your ecosystem.
The grass is a great example. I hadn't thought about that, but I'm going back to when my mom and dad, I was young, we were poor, lived on farm. They get that seed catalog every year. And it was important to us to have a good garden. I mean, that was part of what we were going to eat on that year, literally. And
Mm-hmm.
they'd go through that seed catalog, which was, I have no idea where the company was, and pick out big boy tomatoes and, whatever this, that, the other. And burpee seed, I think it was actually going back in time. And, and I don't know where that seed was coming from, but we're just fine in our rocky garden in the Ozarks as long as Grant was out there weeding and hoeing and doing okay. Yeah, that's the. You talked a little bit about timing, Keith. I want to talk about that because I get this question all the time. Grant, I want you to make us a poster or a calendar. Do this here, do this here, do this here. And I tell them I can make a relative do this first, do this second, do this third, but I wouldn't dare give you a date. Why is
Mm-hmm.
that, Keith? Why would I not want to give people date? Because I know you get this question all the time too.
Well, because every year is different. Every year is completely different. From temperatures, from precipitation, and so that's where it becomes not just a science, but it's also an art. And the good land manager, the food plot manager, it's just like a good farmer. You have to look at what the land is telling you. You need to take that feedback. And so a lot of times when we make recommendations for people, we don't go off a calendar date, we'll go off a soil temperature, or we may say, X number of weeks before or after your first frost. Now, you're never exactly going to know when that is, but you kind of get a feeling for it feels like it's going to be a late fall or an early fall or an early spring or a late spring. But really, soil temperatures is a really good key because and it's never been easier to you can get online multiple places and just boom find what your soil temperature is, not only what it is in your area but what it is historically in your area. And by comparing the two, you'll be able to see, hey, this is a warmer spring than normal, or this is a colder spring than normal. There's great tools out there. People should be taking advantage of them if they're not. And that gives you an indication because if your soil temperatures are warmer than normal and they've stayed that way for a while, that probably means you can plant sooner than maybe what you have in the past. And if they're colder than normal, colder than that average, and it's been that way for a while, you kind of see a trend. Hold off, just leave that seed in the bag, wait another week, get those soil temperatures up where they need to be, and then go plant.
That is great advice, Keith. And I hope everyone, no matter what you're planting, take that to heart because that is one of the big keys to having a successful food plot. Keith, so y'all are huge. And years ago, people have heard the story. I literally drove up there and twisted your arm to get into, the food plot or the wildlife side of business. So thankful I have because your knowledge has helped not just me, but so many food plot farmers. How can people order seed? What's the best way to order seed and put that in scale? And I know y'all sell enough seed to literally plant millions of acres, not just a few food plots. You probably sell more seed in total than all the food plots combined in the United States. Literally, everyone just think about that. Green cover probably sells. No one knows how many food plots are out there. More seed for the cover crop ag business in total than all the food plots combined. That's a wealth of knowledge. And I want everyone to go to the Green Cover website. They got a lot of webinars and seminars and great publications. They put an annual book out that I love reading cover to cover and earmark the pages. Daniel, read this. Tim, you got to get on this one, man. This is what we're not doing right. How can people take advantage of that? And how can they order seed from Green Cover?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So first of all, you're right. We put a lot of time and effort, just like what you guys do, into education and creating educational material. So the first thing I would encourage people to do is go to our website, greencover.com. Go to the resources page, because you can download these soil health resource guides. You can see a couple of them in the background here. And we have a wildlife article in there every year. But more importantly, it's just full of soil health information. All those things that we talked about, getting the minerals out of the soil and into the plant and then into the livestock. It's got people talking about how they've done that. So it's very practical, very real world type articles and advice. So you can download those for free. We've also got lots of videos. We've got lots of blog posts about not only soil health and cover crops, but there's some food plot stuff on there as well. So take advantage of that. We've got a YouTube channel that has 450 some videos. It's never been easier to educate yourself on this process. And then once you're on our website, you can click on the button that says store, and we've got all of our mixes on there, both the food plot as well as for gardeners. We've got we've got mixes for the cattle guy, and if you're grazing chickens, we've even got a chicken mix now, Grant. And so there's all that information on there. So that's the place to start. Check all that out. You can order right off that store and have it shipped right to your door. Or if you have questions, you can call us. We've got a young man named Colton Toney, he is our wildlife food plot expert. I know he works really closely with Grant and Daniel. So he's just a wealth of information and knowledge about that as well. So if you get stuck, aren't sure what to do, you can give Colton a call, and he's a great guy to help you out.
Yeah, he is. He's been very helpful to me and a lot of my friends too. Keith, thank you so much for taking time today, once again, to share. Hopefully we can have you back on a little closer to food plot planting season.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of getting itchy. I'm out there, even though I'm snow covered looking out my window right now. I've got the itch.
I
Tim
know.
was working on the tractor the other day, making sure we're ready to roll. So I know a lot of other guys are itchy out there. And so Keith and his team, a large team at Green Cover, are here to help all of us, myself included. And I want everyone to do that. Keith, again, thanks so much for taking time to pour into the wildlife and food plot community and making us all better stewards of God's creation.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to do so. Thank you.
Every time I visit with Keith, either in private or on one of these webinars, I learn so much. I hope you learned a lot today and you can apply it to your food plot program. Offline, after Keith and I finished, I had another idea, and we're going to come back in about a month and let Keith teach us about all the free resources for food plots. You're not going to want to miss that one. Even more important to those free resources for food plots is the free love from our Creator. It's hard to turn down free love, especially when it's for eternity. And to learn more about that free love, I encourage all of you to literally seek God's Word, study it daily, and apply it to your life. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.